Hello, and welcome to the Understanding Other Dementia Behaviors module. For our first lesson, we're going to talk about wandering. 6 out of 10 people with dementia will wander. A little over half, it's pretty scary. But one thing we do have to consider is whether or not it's problematic wandering. If your loved one is just kind of bopping around the house, looking out the windows, moving things around, is that really a problem? No, I don't think so. Where it does become problematic is if they are leaving the house, especially if there's, other dangers around like roads or lakes or things like that, or if they're wandering away while you're out in public, at the mall or the grocery store, that can get pretty scary. First thing we have to consider is why are they wandering? And there's many reasons that people with dementia wander. Is it goal oriented? This is usually when we see things be a little bit more problematic is if there's a goal associated. As we've talked about in other modules, your loved one may be living in a very different time or place. So they might think that they need to go pick up the kids from school or go to school themselves. I had a very scary incident with one of my clients who was still living at home. She had gotten up, I think 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and decided that she had to go to school. And it was in the middle of February and during what they call a polar vortex, whereas I think 20 below outside or something close to that. And she left the house without shoes on. And luckily, thank God, the snowplow driver saw her and got her into the clubhouse for the condo complex and figured out who knew her and how to get her back to the place. But that would have been a very, very different story had he not been there. But she just as real as anything else, she thought she had to go to school and she set off to do so. Sometimes they just are restless. They need a little bit more exercise, especially if you haven't been doing much all day. They've got some pent up energy that they need to get out. So they might just be looking to burn off some of those calories. Wandering, like all other behaviors, is also associated with the unmet needs. Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they hot? Are they cold? Do they need to go to the bathroom? Are they bored? They might not be able to verbalize that they have these problems and they're wandering around looking for a solution. Has there been any change in the routine or schedule? Are you in a different place? Are you doing things at a different time? All of these can definitely play into wandering and any other, quote unquote, behavior that we talk about. A lot of wandering also happens when somebody's left alone. They look around and they can't quite orient. They don't have you to ask questions. We'll cover repetitive questions later on. But if they can't find somebody to answer the questions and orient and make them feel safe, they might get up and try to find that person or just get out of that situation. Sometimes wandering also occurs when your loved one is having a difficult time finding a familiar place, like the bathroom or the bedroom, or I'm sure we've all experienced, even without dementia, sometimes you walk into a room and you can't remember why you walked in. So your loved one might be doing that over and over again and not being able to remember that, oh yeah, I came here to use the bathroom, or, I came here to get my purse. And then that cycle continues. Another super common thing that we've talked about a few times already is them wanting to go home, even if they are home. As somebody progresses through their dementia journey, the most recent memories are the first ones to be lost. So they work their way kind of backwards through life in their head. So while they may be at home, they might be thinking of home as the house that they grew up in or some other place like that. And they don't recognize or feel comfortable in their current place. Also, a friend of ours had a very scary situation. I think they were out at a mall, and her father has dementia, and they just turned around and he was nowhere to be seen. Luckily, though, they were at the mall for an event that was a Alzheimer's fundraiser, so there were many capable and aware people there that were able to put together who he was and that he might be having some difficulties, and they were able to help get him back to his daughter and his wife. Anytime you've got a lot of commotion, unfamiliar places, unfamiliar people, it's easy to lose track of your loved one. So some tips to prevent wandering. We're refer back to this several times throughout this course, is filling out that behavior chart, keeping track of if there's a certain time or there's a certain event or a certain person or something that led up to this behavior will help you prevent it in the future. Where were they, when, and why? Well, was it goal oriented? Did they want to go to school? Is there something we can let them know that they don't have to go to school or work today? Is it always happening at 4:30 because that's when they would punch out every day and they would go home? Those routines and cues can still persist well into dementia. We see it a lot in the facility, especially with retired nurses. They look around and all of the day shift people leave and they say, okay, well, day shift's done. I'm going to go too. And then when you tell them, oh no, you're here, they're wondering why the rest of day shift got to leave and they're still stuck there. We'll refer back to this over and over again, just as much as possible. Keep a routine and have daily kind of plans in place. It'll really help to not throw off your loved one. And then also make sure all of the basic needs are met. Make sure they've got enough food, enough water, that they're going to the bathroom regularly, that they're not in pain. If we can stop these from being kind of the spark that starts the wandering, it can help prevent it. It can help prevent it from happening in the first place. You also want to avoid busy and overwhelming environments. That's not always possible, but as much as you can, avoid those kind of situations because that can trigger wandering and other behaviors. Also, obviously, need to ensure proper supervision of your loved one. There's something we say when we're talking to families and things like that is that things seem to work until they don't, or things aren't a problem until they are. So while early on you might be able to leave your husband at home with a newspaper while you run to the grocery store, there's a good chance that what will stop you from doing that is something bad happening. So just need to be really conscientious of that. As we stated earlier, being left alone is a common trigger for wandering. They look around, they can't find you, and so they start looking. Also want to keep car keys out of sight. There's lots of different things that can be triggers that it's time to do something or time to go. So if somebody sees their car keys, they might think, oh yeah, I've got to go to work, or I've got to go to the store, or I've got to go get gas, and that can trigger things. Even if your loved one doesn't drive anymore, I've heard plenty of horror stories about people finding other person's keys or even their own keys, the car's still in the garage, and taking off well after anybody thought that person could drive. It's a really dangerous situation. So you may need to keep your car keys locked up. You might need to do something, if they do still have their own car, you might need to do something to decommission it, like disconnect the battery or something to that effect, that you're not destroying the car, but if they do somehow manage to get the keys and find them and get in the car, it won't start or drive. You also just need to comfort and reassure your loved one if they feel lost or disoriented or abandoned. Pretty much for all the behaviors that we talk about, just being kind and being reassuring and being calming can help make them much less severe. There are also several environmental interventions that you can do. So just changes around the house to make it safer for you and your loved one. If your loved one can still read, something as simple as a stop sign or a note on the door saying, I'm upstairs or I'll be right back can help prevent them from taking the next step out of the house or into some other place where they're not supposed to be. You can also sometimes use like a black mat or a changing floor covering around the doors. There's a thing that happens with people with dementia where they see changes in flooring as either steps or voids or things like that. So if you have lots of patterns or things like that in your carpet, sometimes they'll try to step over them or step down onto them. So some people say that having a black mat outside the door can make that enough of a visual deterrent that they don't want to take the chances stepping down into that void. You can also camouflage the doors a little bit. I've seen several great examples online. People put like a curtain on a door or decorate it to make it look like a bookshelf. And you can also hide the doorknob. So there are childproof doorknobs that you can put over the knob and they'll spin around. I saw somebody in a group that I was in the other day. They had knitted crocheted doorknob covers, so you had to have fairly strong grip to be able to turn the knob without it spinning. And I thought that was a pretty clever solution. So yeah, like we said, childproof locks, or I know a lot of people put locks up higher on the doors. Very often with dementia and just with age in general, uh, people tend to be hunched over a little bit, and they look mostly down, especially with the narrowing of the visual field. That's more important, being able to see what you're walking on, what you're stepping on. They tend to look up a lot less. So if you can put locks where they can't see or they can't reach and you can, that can be helpful as well. There's also lots of different devices and door alarms that you can install. Some of them are as easy as a double-sided tape. You put a battery in there and it'll set off a squealer alarm if that door is open. And then there's other ones that tie into home security systems, things like that are also good options. Definitely going to want your loved one to have an ID bracelet. You can get those all sorts of different places. It just has the name, the diagnosis, where they live, or a phone number to call. So if they do happen to leave the house, and are found by somebody, that person can help get them back to you, and they know that they've got some sort of deficit. We're doing a lot of research right now into different GPS trackers. There seem to be a few options out there. We haven't landed on one that we really love, but they are available and they're out there, and we'll let you know as we find one that really seems to work well. And there's also a program called Project Lifesaver. It's kind of similar to the GPS trackers, but it's actually a radio frequency tracker. And your loved one would have a bracelet that's kind of hard to get off, and it's got a tracker in it, and you would work in conjunction with local Project Lifesaver units. Lots of police stations have them, things like that. So if your loved one was lost, the police station could activate the radio frequency thing and track them down. There are also options to buy your own radio frequency tracker, but those are, I think, about $700, and they're pretty complicated. Before you do decide to get the Project Lifesaver, though, you definitely want to check and see if it's something that's available in your area. I took a look in mine, and there's not a police station or anybody around us within, I think, 50 or 60 miles that use it. But if you look I also looked at Florida, where there's obviously high concentrations of older adults and people with dementia, and pretty much all of the sheriff's departments in that area had them. So uh, we'll provide the link to the website for that, and you can look into that as well. Somewhat luckily, in recent years, people have gotten really fond of their cell phones and kind of addicted to them, and we're, I think, kind of in a gray area right now where many of our folks living with dementia aren't habituated into carrying a cell phone. But I think in the next 10 or 15 years here, this would be a really reliable way to track. Pretty much all cell phones or smartphones have some sort of GPS tracking capabilities on it. But the current issue is, are they going to take that with them? In a few years, when it's the millennials and Gen Xers living with dementia, they probably will be pretty reliable in carrying their phone, and that would be a good tracking option as well. But hopefully, we do have a cure by then. You also need to make a plan for wandering before it happens. Get together a list of people that you can call for help, friends, neighbors, have all the numbers for the police station, things like that put together, and get to know your neighbors in your neighborhood. Make sure they are aware that your loved one has dementia. So if they do see them out wandering or see something that's out of place, they can call you and let you know before they get too far away. You'll also want to make a list of places that they may wander. If they worked nearby, or if they, there's a golf course down the road they always went to, or a friend's house, or their parents' house. That could very well be, if it's goal oriented, they might think that they have to go to work, and you start heading that direction. You also want to have a recent photo, any medical information or GPS information to be able to give to the authorities or neighbors. We did include a download at the end of this module that we'll take a look at that has all of the relevant information that you would need in an elopement situation. One interesting thing Two is that studies have shown that when people do wander, they tend to go the direction of their dominant hand. So most people are right-handed, so most often if they leave the house, they go off to the right. And I think it's conditioned on us in other aspects. Grocery stores are laid out the same way. Pretty much anytime you go into a grocery store, you turn right. So if you have no other information and you think they went down the road, it's probably safest to go to the right if they're right-handed. You can also enroll in 24/7 wandering support through the Alzheimer's Association and Medical Alert. We've included the web page here that will give you more information on how to do that. That can be a really valuable resource, and they know how to efficiently kind of canvass and call the right people and get the ball rolling in finding your loved one. And in the event that this does happen, you want to search for no longer than about 15 minutes and then call the authorities. Any longer than that, the chances of being found safely do decrease. So, and when you do call, be sure that the authorities know that your loved one does have dementia, especially if there's any chance that they might be, physical or, resistant when the police do find them. That can make an already bad situation much worse. So here's that wandering face sheet that we talked about. We can put the name and phone number up at the top, and then, of course, a recent photo that looks like them, as well as their diagnosis. For medications, you want to include especially anything like insulin or blood thinners or heart medications that need to be taken at a certain time. Include those in there, so if they are found and can't quite get back to you in time, they are aware of what those needs are. Right or left-handed, any information associated with any GPS trackers or alert bracelets, things like that. And then jot down too the places that they may wander, who to call when found, and any other notes. So, like I said, this is available in the download section, this module, and having this in place before you need it is always a good idea. I can't recommend that strong enough. Thank you, and we will see you in the next lesson.